Hi, everyone. Welcome to our panel chat on community-led marketing. My name is Kirsty. I am the content lead over at ComSor. And our panel for this exploratory chat is a group of people who I am a huge fan of. So I'm going to try not to descend into fangirling, but please forgive me if I do. I'm going to keep it together. So they are Gesche Haas, founder and CEO of Dreamers and Doers, Sarah Stockdale, founder and CEO of Growclass, and Vincent Boon, founder and CEO of Standing on Giants. Welcome, guys. Thank you so much for taking time out to chat to us today.
Glad to be here.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yay, can't wait.
So a little housekeeping before we dive in. A heads up that this event is being recorded for folks who wanted to attend but can't make it. And we are going to be posting this to our YouTube a little bit later. So if you want to turn your camera off, please do. Obviously not our guests. I would appreciate it if you guys kept your cameras on. That's just for the audience. And yeah, if you have any burning questions for Sarah, Geisha, or Vincent, please drop them in the chat, and my colleague Maria and I will keep an eye on those, and we'll jump into those at the end. Yeah, okay, I'm just admitting a few more folks, and we'll get cracking. So I did kind of give you guys the perfunctory intro, but I would love it if you would kind of we could maybe start with Geisha. If you could go around, tell us who you are, about the cool thing that you built and what you had for breakfast, please.
Hi, I'm Geisha, and I'm excited actually to start about the breakfast question. I had some avocado with eggs, and not just any eggs, because I live in Wyoming and we actually have our own chickens. So those eggs are actually from our chickens. So that's what makes it special. I've built Dreamers and Doers, which is what we call an award-winning community and PR team amplifying extraordinary women leaders and entrepreneurs. And maybe one thing that is special about community is that our community is that it's been around for about 10 years. So we were very, very early in the community business. So when we were running this in the early days, people would keep asking me when I'm going to get a real job again, and how my project's doing, and just like all the things. It was really awkward charging. I mean, charging is always awkward, but especially when like you're the only person charging for community. So really excited to share the lessons, and just so cool to be in this room on the topic of community, put together by ComStor and Community Club. It's just like a whole different world than it was 10 years ago. So just so thrilled to be here.
Times have changed for sure. Thank you so much, Geisha. Sarah, please tell us all of the above.
So breakfast wasn't that exciting. I had a bagel and some grapefruit, which my son stole part of, which was great.
Yeah.
I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Growclass. We are a combination of a growth marketing training program with the goal of helping women and marginalized people break into six-figure roles in tech. And then we also have a community of marketers and founders called Gather, which is just the kindest corner of the internet. And I just love hanging out in there with some of the best marketing professionals, but also the best people that I get to spend time with every day. And I'm just excited to meet you all and to hang out for the next little while. Thank you for having me.
Firstly, I'm amazed that you managed to get your son to eat grapefruit. We need to talk about that after this call.
Oh no, it was the bagel. He stole the bagel. The grapefruit was untouched.
Okay.
Don't worry.
Got you. And I did also want to say, because I know we have a lot of marketers who are going to be watching this and who are in the call now, you guys have just started some really awesome research. I think I saw on social today about salaries in marketing as an industry as a whole, and you're going to be collecting data from people from all parts of the industry, and I want these results. So if you guys do too, please go and check out Sarah on LinkedIn. Is a good place to find the link, or any Growclass platforms.
I'll pop it in the chat. We launched it yesterday, so there are, I think, like 380 marketing salaries. So you can filter and benchmark yourself and help use that information to negotiate for a higher pay. So
yeah, we love salary transparency over at ComStor and the Community Club. That was an aside. Vincent, tell us what you had for breakfast and also about Standing on Giants, please.
I just had a bit of Greek yogurt with some fruit for breakfast. That was it. And yeah, Standing on Giants, gosh, been going for quite a while, over 10 years now. And we help other businesses set up and run communities. And some notable clients, I guess, would be Airbnb, who we've been running their community for since inception all the way to now. And yeah, we work with Heineken, Lenovo Legion laptops, banks, insurance companies, utility companies, all kinds. So yeah, and I've been involved in communities for about 20 years. So yeah, quite enjoying it.
It's a pretty cool place to be, especially right now. What I love about this panel is that we have community is pivotal to all of your businesses, but in very different ways. So I'm just going to do a quick summary. You guys have touched on this. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but at Growclass, so community is an important part of your educational offering. And then at Dreamers and Doers, community is the offering. Whereas at Standing on Giants, you're creating communities for other companies. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Okay, amazing. I think we're going to get some awesome responses for you guys purely based on that. And also because you're all veterans. You've been in the industry, you've been doing community things for far longer than it was a buzzword like it is right now. Vincent, you've been working in community for a very long time, and you've seen how powerful it can be at every step of kind of a business life cycle. Am I right in thinking that you first saw this in action in the early 2000s at Sony?
Just before Sony, I was working for a company called Eidos, and Eidos make games like Tomb Raider, so Lara Croft, Hitman, Championship Manager, which was all about managing football teams. So yeah, and for them, I set up their very first kind of like closed beta community. We got through the marketing department, we kind of had a bunch of addresses, email addresses from people back in the day. And we just reached out to them and said, hey, there's a game here. Would you like to test the game? And we got a lot of responses, and eventually had 20,000 people testing a game. And they were huge fans of the game, and they started adding in their own leagues and ladders and created newspapers about what happened during the weekend and that kind of stuff. And we started adding that to the game. And that's when I thought, wow, this is really fun. I want to do more of this. And that's when I moved over to Sony, back in the heady days of PlayStation 2. And the PlayStation 2 could also go online. So yeah, we also built out a community. That community eventually grew to cover about 9 different languages, and everything that PlayStation did. PlayStation Portable, all the games that they created. We even had the very first virtual reality world in PlayStation Home, and that was on the PlayStation 3. And we did interviews with the founders and, with different people who were making games. So yeah, it was really good fun. And then from there on, I moved over to GiveCaf, which was a mobile phone company here in the UK, which was really kind of like focused on getting the community, right, the members of the mobile phone network really at the heart of the business. And so that was kind of like the case study of, gosh, what can you really do with community when you really marry it with business? And that community was really kind of like responsible for about 50% of all acquisition of customers. They did probably about 80% of all our customer service. Only the account related things were actually going to go to customer service. Everything else was done by the community. They were in our actual commercials, right? So the extras that you see were all community members. We did all kinds of crazy stuff with them. We even ran a radio station at one stage. And so that was so much fun. I thought, right, well, we can do this, right? We can repeat this success. And that's when we set up Standing on Giants. And yeah, pretty much straight away, first customer was Airbnb. And we kind of grew from there, and yeah, did that for many other companies and startups, and yeah, cool, art companies like Art Finder. And yeah, it's been a crazy ride, but really, really fun.
I love hearing about your journey and how it started in kind of a lot in the world of gaming. And it's really interesting because I think the community industry as it stands now has a lot to thank gamers for.
Absolutely, and still do.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I want to jump over to Sarah now. A similar question. Could you weigh in on how community has impacted the growth, specifically at Growclass?
Yeah, absolutely. Referrals are number one fastest growing and lowest cost acquisition channel. About 50% or more of our cohorts, on average 50%, but more in 2023, it seems, are coming direct from referrals from our community. So it is our best tool for acquisition, and it's also just the thing people talk about when they graduate from an online, like normally online courses are, you take them because you have to for professional development or because you want to, because you're interested in a thing. But you don't go around talking about them 2 years later. It's not really a thing that you end up doing. But we have folks in our community who are still active in our Slack channel, who still show up to our events, who still come to our mastermind sessions, who took Growclass 3 years ago. So we just we get to hold on to people through our community. And then that has, a flywheel effect on our growth, which has been really helpful because we're, small, young, bootstrapped company.
Yeah, absolutely. And you founded Growclass with you. We will have a community from the get-go. Like, it was never a question for you about whether or not we should build this thing.
The first cohort that we did in person, we took everyone out to dinner at the end of it. So like it was always part of the DNA of the business.
Absolutely. Okay. Geisha, same question for you. How has community, I want to know kind of how community has impacted your growth, but it's a difficult question to ask you because community is everything at Dreamers and Doers. I wonder if you could speak to that.
It is, and we've actually made it part of our fiber and DNA that we say that we don't invest and do any traditional marketing. So from the beginning, partially because also we're bootstrapped, we just didn't have time to invest in marketing in addition to creating the best community experience ever. But it just always was more aligned to our values to invest in creating this amazing experience, because then automatically our community members are the ones that do the marketing for us. So it kind of works out two ways. One is like making this great experience, but then also making it easy for members to share. And also because we are a highly curated community, like if we did do marketing, and it's questionable if it would work or not, but it's also about getting the right people and getting them to join with the right mindset, not just because they saw like an ad and they think, what can I get out of this? But because they hear people talk positively about it. And when people apply, we always ask, how did you find out about it? And so many, like it's usually like nearly 50-50 split, but either they'll say like I consistently over the years have kept hearing people rave about it so much. I just like, and that's why I'm here now. Or they'll say like, oh, someone in my network that I don't even know that well shared something, right? Like, so it kind of goes both ways, but it was like intrinsic motivation to share. And then in terms of making it easy to share, we, for example, we give them the tools to like an overview, like how can you add it to your LinkedIn? And just like little things where like, it's kind of like built in. And then the last thing I'll add to is, so once we did experiment, essentially paying for mentioning Dreamers and Doers in an aligned like newsletter, and it's basically the newsletter that has like the most subscribers with our particular audience. And we paid $800, we got featured twice, and one person signed up. And then on the flip side, there was another community that's very aligned to us. Like we love this community so much, but someone in that community asked like, hey, I just applied for Dreamers and Doers. Like, what are your thoughts on this? And then all these other people chimed in who are also our members and be like, we had such a great experience. This was amazing. And I think we had nearly 10 people apply from that. It didn't cost us anything. It was just like this long-term investment in like making a great experience. And then our members did the work for us.
That is incredible. And also incredible because you have given me the perfect segue into my next question. Basically, I want to get into the crux of our chat today with a potentially contentious statement. Please tell me if you disagree with me. But I feel like old school marketing is not as effective as it once was, as you have touched on now, Geisha. Social media is messy, it's crowded and kind of gross. In a lot of ways right now, people's inboxes are overflowing. We're inundated with ads. And I'd argue that it's harder than ever to connect with your customers. It's really hard to reach people now. Do you think that this is a problem that community can solve? I'm going to throw it over to Vincent first up.
I don't know. I'm not sure if I agree with the statement that it's harder than ever to connect with our user base. My view of it was or is that previously companies didn't connect with their users at all, right? Their products were, in the shop or whatever it was, and, you had to like it or not buy it, right? So I think, traditional marketing, billboards, commercials on TV, whatever it was, right? Like it was something that for what we really saw back in 2010 with GiveGav, where we really started to invite people into the conversation, right? We didn't even know what we were going to charge for certain things yet, right? For data, we just opened that question up to the community. That was, that's never been done before. Actually asking your users, gee, what do you think you should pay for this, right?
Risky business, I'd imagine.
Yeah, well, it was a lively discussion, that's for sure. But but we even had it on a price rise, right? At one stage, we had to actually increase the prices, and we explained why, and we asked them by how much, right? Should we increase the prices? And if we, if you'd give us, an extra bit of money per minute or per text or something like that, then we could do X, Y, and Z. And, at that point, the community actually agreed to give us an extra penny per text sent, right? Which allowed us to do a whole bunch of ideas that the community had. So, I think, yeah, those kind of like examples of really, connecting with your audience and then really working with them. I don't think that was seen before.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I think that is something that we can only see grow. Yeah, it's really noisy with all the kind of like different channels that we have and that kind of stuff, right? But I think, from a company perspective, if you are proactive about the conversation, then you can actually have really deep, genuine conversations about your product and your service, and that's what makes all the difference, right? That's what when you really learn what your customers want. And rather than kind of like, I don't know, do social listening or stuff like that, right? And you just hear the shouting, but you don't have the actual genuine conversation, with differing points of view. So I think, I think the different channels give you different ways in which you can communicate with your customers, right? Some of it is chat, so it's like kind of like, knowledge of the moment. Others are more traditional message boards where you can have more long tail conversations. You can share roadmaps with your customers and, all kinds of cool things. I think that from, all the different tools we now have is a really kind of like exciting time, really.
Yeah.
And gives us loads of abilities to actually really connect with our customers. So yeah, that's kind of like my view on it, I would say.
That's such a great way of framing it, because I think the connecting is the key. And that's almost something that people, in my mind, I feel like people are hungry for. They're not we keep talking about how people buy from people. They don't, necessarily want to buy from brands anymore. They want to buy from a brand that they connect with through, whatever mechanism that is. Sarah, as someone in marketing, what are your thoughts?
There's kind of two sides of my brain, because the community side, I completely agree with Vincent. I think now we don't have a choice. Like, I think before you could think of marketing as broadcast. Like, I'm going to put out a bunch of ads. I'm going to get a bunch of emails into people's inboxes. I'm just going to inundate them with information, follow them around the internet until they convert. It's really hard to do that now. It's hard to cookie people. Like it's with, we're getting better at privacy, and that's making marketing harder. So we're worse at broadcast. And people are going to tell you what they think. Like your customers are going to tell you how your product has impacted them, regardless of whether or not you want that information. So I think before, when folks I was building a community back in 2013 with college students, we could have just ignored them a lot of the time. Now they would be talking about us on TikTok every day, or not talking about us at all, which is worse. And so I think now, if you are refusing the conversation, if you are refusing to allow your community and your users to shape your product and shape your marketing and shape your messaging, then you're going to fail as a business. So I think community is going to become an essential part of businesses, and so many of them are going to do it so poorly because they're not used to having relationships with the people using their products and tools, and having authentic relationships with them, not just throwing up a Slack group and saying, oh, it's my customer board of directors, then letting the bales of hay roll through it. So I think the companies who are really great at actually having authentic relationships with people are the ones who are going to win. And I agree with you that it is really hard to be a marketer, who's measured on performance right now. Like there's just so much crap everywhere. The amount of cold sales emails that are horrific in my inbox, like we're just competing with bad stuff for eyeballs and for attention. And there's so much bad stuff that it forces you to be that much better, to be that much more human, to be that much more authentic. And you have to do that much more work to figure out what's going to connect with your customers, because your customers are sick and tired of hearing from anyone. It doesn't really matter who, because our inboxes are just nuts. So it's hard to be a marketer, and the good ones are going to crack authentic relationships with folks.
I love that. I love something that you said now really resonated with me. It's about talking with rather than talking at. I think that's really powerful. Gesche, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this as someone who hasn't relied on traditional marketing to grow your business.
Yeah, so many great things were shared. And I think one interesting angle I've seen now, having been in the community world for so long, that we also see some of these trends nearly in the community world, in the sense that, you know, maybe 10 years or 5 years ago, like everyone had maybe 1 or 2 communities, but now even the communities are competing for attention. So also being mindful, like as you create your community, you're not going to be like the community, like it has to, like as Sarah said, like be just like really thoughtful. Otherwise it's going to be like just this dead community. But there's still, like, we all crave this. Like the more we get inundated, actually, the more we crave these authentic connections, finding our people, having people that we can trust. Like even I personally, like I only buy things that, you know, a friend recommended on Instagram, not on an ad, right? So I think it's just like this same development. And I think there is so much community opportunity for community, but just really having a strong why, not just doing it for the sake of like, oh, I'm just going to create a community to sell stuff. Like that's not going to work.
Absolutely. You've got to kind of lead with value. I mean, creating a community for like your salespeople to like fish in a barrel. Why would you join a community like that? If you know you're joining a community and someone's immediately going to start promoting or marketing or selling to you, there's nothing more off-putting. And I'm out of there really quickly. So if I'm not getting what I want out of a community, that's such a great point as well, Geisha, that the community is also becoming crowded, and it's going to put pressure on community managers or marketers, whoever is handling community, to really build something special. Yeah, which brings me to my next question. Thank you for the good segues. Do you think, Sarah, this is something that we touched on in our chat last week, which is also up on our YouTube channel, about the origin story of Growclass, if anyone wants to check that out. But do you think that community building is going to be an essential tool for marketers going forward?
I think there's always going to be different kinds of marketers. There are going to be the like hardcore analytics performance-based folks who I don't know if I want them also touching community, because I want them focused on the thing that they're really good at. But for folks who are in any way touching the customer experience, I think you have to be I like to think of it as like host skills. Like I want to hire people who would host the best dinner party, who would bring people in and make them feel so incredibly welcome, find the person who's having a bad time and talk to them, make sure everyone's dietary restrictions are taken care of. Like that's a skill that I think we don't necessarily think of as like a marketing toolkit skill, but I want those like highly empathetic, authentic people who can create experiences. I think that's going to be a really interesting skill. I think a lot of people are going to list community on their resumes. I'm like, I want the people who are like doing it outside of work too, who have like, their own dinner club, who have like other things that they're flexing these skills all the time. Because it's not something that you can just slap on a resume and say that you're good at. It's like, it's a whole skill set that you have to hone. And it's, it's about empathy, human connection, but also how do you scale experiences? And a lot of people are not good at both. So I think the marketers who can figure out how to make people feel like they belong at scale are going to be incredibly important in the next 10 years.
Looking forward to that course on Growclass.
Coming soon.
Hey, here's an idea. Geisha, Vincent, do you have anything to add on community as a skill for marketers?
Geisha, you want to go first?
I thought you, I'll have you go first.
I don't know, like for me, community management has always been a complete skill in its own right? And I think marketers need to learn to be more aware of it and more aware of the potential. So I think working with the community department is, what's going to elevate your marketing, right? So the more closely those two are linked, the more the more interesting kind of like programs you can set up and run. Right, like, I don't know, as an example, you've got people, actually playing roles within commercials, at Gesche, right? But even at the level where it goes to, for example, Airbnb, where they've put a fund aside, which was, I think, $1 billion or maybe even $2 billion of money that is spent in various different areas all over the world to help communities, right? Like proper underground communities. Now, there is a whole kind of like board of community members who help make those decisions, right? So, it's at that level, right, where you can make real genuine change. And I think working with customers, in such a deep kind of like, engaged way is a real, skill set and something that you can't do alongside a marketing job. So I think from a marketing perspective, there will always be a whole range of different things that you need to do, obviously. And yeah, I think community needs to be more part of their brain, right? It needs to take up a bigger space there. And I think in terms of the, general other things you do, it is about thinking, how can I involve community in that, right? And a good example of that is, again, with Gesche, where we put out a range of different banners, right? Simple banner advertising on websites. And our community basically told us, yeah, we don't really like your banners, right? We don't think that they're particularly pretty. So I was like, all right, give us some examples of what you think it should look like. And so they did that. And then they actually said, well, we don't actually like how you describe the product either. Okay, how do you think it should be described? And, at the end of the day, they created a set of 5 different banners, which we actually A/B tested. And turns out 3 of theirs worked way better than ours, right? So we swapped them in, right? So it's those types of kind of like, having that awareness and also being open to your customers, actually, giving input is, I think, the kind of skill that the marketer tier now needs to open up, right? So really work with your community managers to open up kind of like these are types of examples that I'm giving you, these opportunities that are out there. I think that's going to be.
Yeah, sorry, Vincent, I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt.
go for it.
I was just going to say that I love the Gesche example, and I think that speaks to something that our head of community-led, Eric, I think he's on this call as well, once said he loves working in community because the community members are smarter than him. And I think that rings so true. They're often your ICP, right? So they know exactly what they're looking for. Gesche, can you speak to that?
Yes, I think it's fascinating also just seeing the community skill set, how much it's been valued and how much it hasn't been valued over the past few years. Like in the early days, it would, like, community managers, I feel like, got like crazy underpaid, and people also didn't like screen properly. And then in our case, like where we care so much for community, it's taken us nearly 9 years to finally find our head of community, and for me to no longer be our head of community. But like also seeing how I've honed my skills over the years, like I'd agree that it's like so crucial to have these skills, but I think people also like undervalue them nearly by even just like how they position them. There's just like such deep understanding of human psychology, and also like you also want, like, it's not just like, oh, marketing where like how can I get someone to buy, but how can I get them to stay involved? How can I get them to want to be part of this? How can I get them to feel ownership? How can I ask them a question, like form this long-term relationship? And I think it is just so crucial, because even if you are able to get to one transaction, I think the difference with like having more community leaning skills is having I wouldn't even call them transactions, but a relationship that then obviously helps the bottom line, but in a way that is more than like just a transactional relationship. So I think it is so crucial, but not just for marketers, like even the CEO who hires the marketer needs to understand it. It needs to be part of the fiber of a company, in my opinion.
I love that. Part of the fiber of the company. You know, I might steal that somewhere, Geisha, and put that in. We'll quote you. We'll quote you. So it feels to me like, I mean, of course, you're all on the same page about how essential community is for the future of business growth. What are your thoughts on businesses that don't feel that it's necessary, or businesses that are starting up now that don't leverage community as part of their strategies? Gesche, you're on my screen, so I'm going to start with you.
It feels like an uphill battle. It's like, I mean, in some cases, like we benefit by not everyone leveraging community, but honestly, like even what Sarah said, like that's the lowest cost acquisition. And I also think if you do it right, like, and I prioritize this highly, it's like much more fulfilling. Like I'd rather run a company that feels values aligned, where my customers, like everyone who, like sometimes I will meet someone for the first time and they're like, Dreamers and Doers, I've had like 10 people rave about this. You know, it's just like integrating community, like, and it can be like even on like drier topics, like even if you like sell insurance, like there's always a way to like find your people, find what resonates with them, give it more meaning. And I think the days are just over where we do things just for the sake of doing it. So it's, I honestly think you can like survive, and even if you do it, it's just like you do it more costly, and it's just like less enjoyable for everyone, for yourself and your customers.
Absolutely. Sarah, do you agree?
Yeah, I totally agree. Like I think there's definitely companies, there are kinds of companies where community doesn't make sense for them.
Okay.
And that's totally fine. Not, you know, the wrench company, if they want to have a community of builders and that's part of their thing, then go for it. But I think, you know, some things are just utilities that we're going to just go pick up when we need them, and we don't necessarily need to join something around it. But I do think there's doing community and doing community well. So I would also say, like, if you are going to, as a company, invest in community, don't, you know, hire one person, put them on an island, give them no resources, and like hope it works, because it's not going to. It's actually going to do damage to your brand. So I would say, like, if companies aren't ready to invest in community, don't care about it, don't have values aligned, an executive team that sees the potential of it, don't do it. Just don't do it, because you will do damage to your brand. You're going to stress and burn out probably a really smart, talented young person, and you're not going to see, you know, the results from it. So I really hope that companies that do want to do this work actually do the work, actually give it time, hire people and give them resources, and you know, you're not going to create. We had someone, we talked about this on the last call. We had someone tattoo our logo on themselves. That doesn't happen after a month of working on community. Not for Growclass, for a company that I built a community around called Tilt. And that didn't happen like the third day that we were building the community, right? That happened years in. We opened up our office space to let students come study from there. Like we did things consistently that built up that brand love. And that requires time and resources and effort. So hire great people and then give them leash to do those things well.
Vincent, I think you can speak to something that Sarah has just touched on as well. How should companies know if community is a good fit for them? If it's a good kind of, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think your local plumber needs one, right? So, you know, yeah.
Maybe he
so
does.
I think it's really,
Maybe he's lonely.
I think he'll be all right without it. But yeah, it's just purpose, right? So, you know, you have a community that is around a purpose. And if you don't have that purpose, then there's no real point in actually creating, you know, any kind of community. Because that's what, you know, people rally around, right? There's a reason for you having that community, and that is, you know, for every company that's different. So, you know, that's usually where the starting point is, right? Does your actual company have a purpose, right? Or is it just selling something, right? Is it pure utility? And yeah, I think brands these days are looking more and more for that purpose. Right? They are looking more to connect with people. And so, outside of their thing that they're selling, they're also often want to stand for something. And they want to bring their customer along that ride. Right. And, because otherwise, what are you standing for? Right. If you're not actually, putting your money where your mouth is, then nothing really changes. Right. And your customers see through that as well. So, and often it's that, to ensure that it's not an empty purpose statement, right? You actually have to be shown to do some real things. And then, you're going to look to, who can you rally around that? Well, that'll be your customers, right? And that's where kind of like where that relationship starts. And then, yes, then you obviously are also then opening up to, talking about how your product or service, is actually going. And so I think, that combination of people, being interested in talking to you because you have an interesting purpose, then leads on to many other benefits, right? And then now they're involved with you. Well, someone who's involved with your community and your company and your purpose is going to talk to their friends and family about it, right? Which is where we get all of our referrals from, right? If you do something a lot, you're going to be talking about it. Right. And so, and if you're there anyway, and someone has a problem with the service or, an item, you're there anyway. So if they've got a question, you might as well answer it. Right. And so that's where you kind of like get that nice peer-to-peer help from. And I think, a lot of these kind of things are around, how we manage communities are organic as long as they are well led. Right. And there's a reason for them being. I think that's kind of like what rounds out the community quite nicely.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious to find out if any of you can chat to strategies, perhaps for a company who doesn't have the resources. Maybe there's someone, a lone marketer on this call or watching this recording, who is thinking, I don't have the buy-in to start a community right now. I can't do it. Is there a way? I see the value. Is there a way that I can start to implement some community building strategies, some community-led strategies in my work? Maybe Sarah, you mentioned kind of inviting, I think it was for Tilt, you were inviting students to come and use your office space. Activities like that, is there something that you could recommend? That's not building a traditional community, but is kind of a community building activity or a community-led activity.
Yeah, for sure. If you don't have, the resources to build a full, community infrastructure, you can just start with like a customer board of directors. Like if there are a few customers that you're in conversation with all the time, like put them in a Slack group or in a WhatsApp group or whatever their favorite tool is, and just ask them questions all the time and get really curious about their experience. Get on the phone with them. You don't have to have a community with thousands of folks in it. It can be like 6 people that you talk to every week, that the names of their kids and their names of the pets, and the problems that they have with the tool, and you're in consistent communication with them, and that becomes the foundation of any community you want to build later. So you need those, you need those early folks who you have those close relationships with, in order, what you'll find when you put together your first Slack group or whatever it is, if it's just you, that it's your face in every single message, it gets old really quickly. But if you have these 6 people that you've been talking to for a year, and they're excited to help you build the foundation of this thing, now it's not just your face in the community. Now you've got a couple of other people who are engaged right off the bat. So yeah, small, everyday relationship building with your customers is the easiest way to get started, in my humble opinion.
I love that. Like, reach out to some kids you used to babysit when you were running
That's
a
how we
platform
started.
for students.
Yeah, that's how we started our ambassador program. I didn't know any college students, so I just called the kids I babysat.
I love that so much. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall for those conversations. Like, hey, like when you were 5.
I used to chat with you for the last 10 years. I see you go to Laurier. It was very uncomfortable. They all became ambassadors, which was very sweet of them.
But it works, right? It's about founding those. It's about, leveraging the relationships you already have, right? And strengthening them or building new ones. Gesche, is there anything in terms of kind of community building tactics or strategies or small actions that you can take?
Totally. And I love that
Yeah.
everyone addressed that building community and doing it right is a lot of work. It's more than a full-time job, usually for one person if you do it properly. So I love the approach also of like figuring out, is this even like, rather than constantly thinking about, oh, I should be building community, I should be like actually taking a step back and being like, is this the right type of community or the right audience to build a community for? And I should say community members rather than audience. But and I think once, like, is there enough of an interest for them to come together and join forces? And I think once that is established, they're very low hanging fruit in terms of, it could be like monthly Zoom calls, right? And then I think it's like first teasing out, like, what is the reason for someone to come together? Like they need intrinsic motivation. Otherwise it'll always be an uphill battle. If you're like, I'll buy you a lunch, and they're coming for the lunch, they're not coming to hang out. And it couldn't work so long, but only you, like, how much budget do you have for a lunch? And, like there needs to be, and it can take a while. I'll give an example, like Dreamers and Doers started by accident out of a personal need. And the first year we just got together on weekends for brunch. It was 2 people. That's how Dreamers and Doers started. 2 people getting brunch. That eventually became 4, became 5, became 10. But it can sometimes be a really slow roll. But I think starting very, very scrappy, but also making sure that there is intrinsic motivation and finding what that intrinsic motivation is, because otherwise you'll invest all this resources, energy, time, money, and then it needs to be able to stand on its own eventually. And I think that that's the key, in addition to being scrappy, to also make sure that whatever you're investing has a future.
Absolutely. Vincent, what are the baby steps? How do you be scrappy with community-led activities, as Gesche said?
I mean, if there's completely no budget, you've usually got your social channels, right? So being proactive on those, right? Actually starting conversations and actually, being there, right? Not just asking a question and walking away and then coming back like, oh, I've got comments, right? We're not looking for comments. We're looking for actual discussions, right? Actual conversations. So I think if you start doing that, and they can be private, but they can also be public, right? And letting other people kind of like jump in on those, and that will, kind of like surface other people that might be interested, right? And anyone that you kind of like does pop up, you send them a private message as well, right? So it's usually for me kind of like private, a mix between private and public. And sometimes, it'll be a private message to someone encouraging to get involved in the conversation. Right? You were involved in the last one, and I thought your insight was really great. We happen to have another really interesting one. I'd love you to share your view, right? And so it's stuff like that, right? Real human contact and a genuine interest in what you're talking about, right? That comes across, right? And that fires up other people. And I think that can be done in any channel. And to be honest, these days, you can start communities on a variety of platforms that don't have to cost the world, right? And then move up to, more expensive, more feature-rich platforms, right? I'm a big fan of, statistics, right? I like to understand how my, community members behave, so I can kind of like, catch them where they fall and find out, various different hot topics and all of that kind of stuff. So where the action is and where you can jump in and have the most kind of like influence and effect. So I think you can definitely start scrappy, and as long as you're actually interested and really something you said right at the start, Kirsty, is you need buy-in, right? If you don't have buy-in, right, from the company, then it's going to be an impossible uphill battle. You will be able to have some really interesting conversations, and to be honest, that is already interesting, right? You can kind of like create your reports with that and bring that back to the business and say, look, I've been having these conversations with our community as it is, and this is what comes back, right? Are you interested in more? Right. So, there's often cases to be built, right? That was the start of community for a long time, right? ROI, right? What are example stories or real metrics where you can, without, shadow of a doubt, actually prove that, hey, right, this is what we invested and this is what we got out, right? Which is why the gift story was so good, because there were a whole bunch of those kind of like MVNOs, virtual network operators, being set up at the same time, right? And we were able to prove that ours cost 50% less, right, to run, right, as a complete, telecommunications company, right? And it was undeniable. And we did this again and again and again, right? So it's those types of, things where it all started. I think, these days, if you're in that situation and you're really passionate about the community, that's a way of doing it.
Absolutely. I think the community industry kind of went through this phase where people were like, social is not community. But there are ways that you can have these interactions that you could be having in a community on social. And there are small ways that you can kind of reap those benefits.
It's a complete blend these days, I think, of change.
Yeah, I like that. I like that thinking a lot. Okay, so I want to leave a bit of time for questions from folks on the call at the end. But first, I want to ask, do you guys have any questions for your fellow panelists? Maybe about their breakfast? I don't know. No, just if you don't, that's cool.
I do have a question for Geisha, actually. Because you kind of limit the amount of members that you let into your community. And I was kind of wondering with that, did you maybe find out, because how many, you've been doing it for a few years, and it doesn't take that many members to create some sort of buzz, right? But then for you, did you maybe, cotton on to like a perfect number of members of community that just creates that perfectly buzzing community? If you have sort of like 1,000, well-selected members, then that's all you need. If you go beyond that, it becomes too unmanageable. You go below that, and there's too little activity. Is that what you found?
I love that. And actually, the question that I have for both of you is a little bit of the inverse of that. But I think we could have a really buzzing, incredible community at a lower number, like at 50 or 100. But we do want to grow, but we would never want to like double or triple, because as part of our onboarding and all of that, we really instill our culture and a lot of things. So if we did triple in one quarter, we accept members only quarterly, that would be really detrimental, because then we'd have so many members that are new, that don't know the culture, and it would just change the fiber. So we always want to grow gradually. And we actually think by focusing on longer term growth, and we not growing that quickly, shorter term, we optimize for how big we can be. That being said, we have recently had these discussions with a company where I said we have two parts to our community. One is we have this jobs platform that 35,000 women, and I spend very little time on that. It's grown all organically, but our community that's paid, it's around 750 more or less. And we talked about that we probably never ever want to grow over 1,000, and that's more of an internal decision, because we would just have a very different team structure if it was more than 1,000, and it would be different fiber of community as well. And then we'd rather do that with the current team and then launch other initiatives, have an impact in other ways, and doing more of the same things. We'd rather than because 95% of our revenue is recurring revenue. So I answered a few questions that you didn't even ask. I think buzz can be created at a lower amount. And I think, honestly, if we were 10,000, I think it would be a different community. People would feel differently about their members. It would just be very different. And actually, the question that I had for both of you was, as you grow, and I'm not sure how big of a communities you've both worked with, but how do you maintain the quality and the glue within a community as you scale above a certain amount? I'd love to hear.
Sarah, do you want to jump in? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I'm happy to jump in. I've run various different, very, very large communities, like the Sony one, GiftCaf, Airbnb, and others. They're where you go over 1 million members, right? So you see different phases in community at that stage, right? So, the kind of early kind of crowd, like you say, you're in that bit where, once there is quite a faster growth, that early crowd kind of feels overwhelmed, right? And so they have a tendency to leave, right? And then new users will pop up who are more used to that kind of level of activity and who thrive on that. And so it's really again working with what we call HEMs, highly engaged members. And so we're really each community manager is kind of looking after, say, about 100 of them, and after that it becomes too much as well. So we kind of look at it like that. And I think you know, that's kind of what, you know, as your community grows, your community starts splitting off into different categories of activity, right? Or sometimes it's a category of a type of content that they really like, you know, a part of your business that they're really interested in. You know, some people are really great at just kind of like, you know, discussing stuff, or others are really good at coming up with ideas, or yet others about helping people, you know, that kind of stuff. So yeah, once it started growing, you know, really big, yeah, people kind of start splitting off. And I guess in your case, you could, you know, instantiate your community, right? You start another one, you know, your first 1,000, and you get your second 1,000, and they never communicate with each other. You know, that's probably a way of continuing to grow that same idea and then keeping it small. Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, I don't have Vincent's million folks community. I think the largest community I managed was 6,000 people, and Growclass is about 750. It was very similar. When we were at the 6,000 mark, it was very similar to what Vincent said. We were starting to require highly engaged community members to manage their own micro communities within the larger group. So we had college, like we'd had separate off by university campus. We had campus managers who were just really highly engaged community members who would welcome folks into that specific thing, take them for beers at the, you know, campus pub. So it required a lot more structure. Something that I think about a lot, like scaling community, scaling belonging, is really challenging, and requires a lot of like systems thinking and structure, in addition to the like warm, welcoming community vibe. So that's something that I'm trying to figure out all the time, and would love to like continue chatting about, because it's a thorny and exciting challenge to tackle.
That's awesome. Thank you, guys. We're up against time now. Are there any audience members who have some questions that they want to throw in? I haven't seen any. Oh, Gesche has a question. Community and marketing need to be so intertwined. From my experience, it's always been a struggle for marketing to appreciate and work well with community, and for leadership to appreciate the value of community. What has worked for you, Sarah? I'm going to ask you this first.
When it comes to like working with founders and executives, it's never my idea. It's always customers' ideas. So if you can bring customer insights to folks on the executive team, like they get really excited, if good ones, they get really excited to learn about their community. So I've always found like the ideas have to come from people who aren't me. I have no ego in that. And, you know, leadership can take those ideas and do, you know, own them if they want to, in meetings. The other thing that I found, and this is more like the growth marketer hat, is the more you can communicate the value of community with data, the easier it is for folks who are holding on to money to give you some of that money. So what we would do was like social map all of our ambassadors, show the network effects of bringing our ambassadors onto campus. We were able to basically graph from like the inception of an ambassador program on a campus to 6 months later, what the growth trajectory was going to look like, how many ambassadors we needed per number of students. Like we knew the data and the structure behind the community strategy. It wasn't just kind of like, oh, we're not really sure what that team over there is doing. It was like a growth team. And that was always really helpful, just communicating the value back to the folks with the purse strings. Because a lot of the time you don't want to be seen as a cost center. You want to be seen as, you know, adding tremendous value to the business, which is what you're doing. So quantifying that value is really helpful.
Vincent, maybe you can speak to the showcasing the value of community for the marketing team. I think it's something you touched on a little bit before.
Yeah, I mean, you know, as with any team, right? So for me, community is across all of the you know, activity that a business does, right? It's not just marketing activity. And one way of, you know, kind of like working with, yeah, these different departments I've found is figuring out what their KPIs are. And once you've kind of like figure out what their KPIs are, can you come up with ideas in how your community members can help them achieve that, right? So, I think as a community manager, you always need to be creative, right? And so it's, coming out with creative solutions to helping these people achieve their KPIs. Right. And once you're able to actually show that, that actually is able and that's possible, then they'll start thinking about you a lot more. And yeah, I think that's kind of like key to it. And yeah, really, as been mentioned already, can you come up with statistics, right? But that's hard, right? Because often you need other people for that. Right. So, churn is a really great one to look at as well. So those people that are community members versus those people that aren't, how much longer did I stay with you? Right. So community is sticky, right? How much more money do they spend? Right. And so, that's often also, much higher for community members because they know much more about your product. So hence they spend more. And if it's possible to look at if there is any kind of like peer-to-peer help happening, finding ways in which you can kind of like, catch the views. So how many views does one of these answers get, right? And then, you can, make your deductions from that. How much does it, is it in terms of a cost per call, right? Could be like £5 or something like that. And you look at those views and, I don't know, you take away 90% and say, all right, 90% didn't help anyone, but 10% did, right? 10 times that, amount of views times the amount that a call costs, right? And do that across your whole community. See what number that throws out, right? And just by you already being really harsh with basically saying, all right, 90% didn't do anything, right? You still come out with really, decent chunky numbers that can really start helping turn people's heads and go, oh shit, this community is actually really helping us. So there are kind of like, proper, standard business metrics that some of it you might need help with, right? In terms of, can you actually run a program, do a holdout group and all of that kind of stuff. So, people can't complain about the results you get. And some of it, hopefully you as a community manager have access to a certain amount of statistics, which you can also then hopefully help prove things and like already heard, right, bring ideas and feedback from that community into the rest of the teams. That always helps.
Thank you. Those answers are so tangible and practical. And I really love your point about KPIs. And that's such a great way to collaborate with like any other team, right? Just go and like check what they're being marked on and see how you can help them. Gesche, is there anything to add for Jesse's question?
This was also fantastic. I have nothing to add.
Amazing. We are up at time, so I am going to call it a day. Guys, thank you so much. This has been incredibly valuable. There are about 12 blog posts I want to go and write from this conversation. So I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And we'll chat again soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. This is wonderful.
Thank you.
So nice to meet you all. Take care.
Awesome.
Bye.
Really good.